And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the Top Dog Talk podcast, episode 61. Man, it's getting up there. Dan, how you doing today? This fine Tuesday evening.
I am great. I'm ready to get going. I'm ready for a good show, and I hope everybody is just as excited as we are.
Absolutely. Dan, we want to kick off right here, right now. We're going to kick it off with hot topics as usual. I wanted to get your thoughts. First top topic of the night, is Darnell Washington being slept on?
So I think this is a very awesome topic to cover because every single time we talk about the Georgia tight end room, we talk about what a loaded tight end room it is. And Brock Bowers gets all of the attention. And I think when Brock Bowers goes to the NFL, it's going to be a very interesting situation where I don't exactly know how they're going to use Brock Bowers because he's extremely talented, but he's not your prototypical tight end. And if you look at somebody like Darnell Washington, a lot of times at Georgia, we just talk about him as a blocker, but I think this year he's shown the ability to catch the ball, high point the ball, go get it. And then when he has the ball in his hands, make some very athletic plays. So it was really funny watching somebody like Kelsey just absolutely carve up the league. And we got to see a guy like Gronk do it for such a long time. Well, Kelsey and Gronk are not the same guy. So it got me to thinking, when these guys get to the next level, what is it going to look like for them? And I really want to touch on the Darnell Washington part of that because I don't know how they're going to use Brock, and I know that Brock's going to be successful. I just don't know how they're going to use him. But I think Darnell has a really good opportunity to be Gronk. And if you look at Gronk's career, he was never like a super fast athletic type of guy. He was just bigger, faster, or bigger and stronger than everybody, and you just couldn't get him on the ground. And I think Darnell has a great opportunity to model his NFL career after what Gronk was able to accomplish. Obviously, you can use him in a straight line blocker. He's going to have a lot of success there. But I really think with the guy that size, if he gets the ball in the secondary, I don't know who's going to tackle that man because they're having fits trying to do it at the college level. And I don't see that stopping at the NFL level. I think when it's all said and done, somebody like Darnell Washington has an opportunity to be a really special NFL tight end. And I would go as far as to say, I think his NFL career is going to be better than what he's able to do here at Georgia. And I just can't wait to see. I mean, listen, so many guys in that room, so many talented guys. I think we both agree a lot of those guys are super talented, going to have great NFL career. But I think that Darnell Washington has a chance to have a special NFL career. And I don't think that gets talked about enough.
Yeah, I'm on the same boat with you. I think it's a very similar situation to what maybe not George Pickens was very successful at Georgia, not as successful as many thought he would be. And to be fair to George, a lot of the expectations on George were he was going to be the first wide receiver to break that 1,000-yard mark since Terrence Edwards did it back all those years ago. So George never eclipsed that mark, and everyone knows that. And now he's off in the NFL, and now that he has a quarterback that is throwing him the ball, he's starting to make some plays. And I think Darnell Washington probably has a pretty similar career arc to that of George Pickens. He's not going to be the receiver like George or like Brock, but we were talking about me and Dan were talking about it last night. He's going to have a good career, and he's going to have a long career. Just the way he plays the game, Brock's going to take a lot of wear and tear because Brock's going to get the ball a lot. Where Darnell's going to be able to help you out a lot as an inline blocker. He's going to be one of the best blockers, coming out of the draft, coming out of college. Whenever he decides to leave for the NFL, he's going to be one of the best blocking tight ends there is. So, I think that's going to help him kind of prolong his career. And while don't sleep on him and his ability to go out there and be a receiver because he is pretty good when he's out there. When you get him the ball, he's going to make some plays. I mean, you saw it against Oregon early in the season, jumping over defenders, running people over. Missouri, just absolutely, he's in midair, Dan, and the receiver bounces. I mean, the DB, the safety comes downhill and bounces off of him. Receiver takes the safety takes more damage than Darnell did on the hit against Missouri. So Darnell's definitely being slept on. Now, is he a first-round pick like Brock? Probably not, unless he does some more crazy things. But never say never with Darnell, because I think Georgia has a lot of options with everyone focusing on Brock Bowers. And you go look at some of the games where, where Brock hasn't gone off, like this past Saturday, or against Missouri didn't necessarily, go way off. Darnell was kind of the big. Darnell got a lot of targets, and I think Darnell's going to carve himself out a pretty manageable role. And I think what Dan said, Dan's comparison to Gronk is on the surface, you may say, oh, that's outlandish. But at the same time, you go back and watch Gronk and how the Patriots used him. Imagine what Darnell can kind of do in a similar system. I think Darnell is a red zone weapon that hasn't been unleashed just yet. So I think Dan's pretty much spot on with that. So with that being said, Dan, let's go into hot topic number 2. What college job that is open or could open would you take? And this is a 2-part question.
So, yeah, it's a 2-part question. The second part is what NFL job could entice a top 5 college coach to take it. So let's start off with the college section of that first. And I think the only official job that's open right now was Arizona State and Georgia Tech, right? I think those
Georgia
are the
Tech
only 2.
And Nebraska.
Oh, Nebraska and Arizona State. So there's 3 openings right now, but I think we both agree for the sake of this argument that Auburn's going to be open. Is it fair to say that? Can we say that? Okay. I'm sure there will be plenty of. Go ahead.
I'm surprised they haven't opened it yet. I thought they may have let him go after the Georgia loss.
So I think it's tough to speculate which jobs are going to open because we know at the end of the day there's probably going to be 5 or 6 that we don't know of yet that will be open. But if we're just taking the ones that we do know about yet, and then we kind of include the Auburn in there, this is very tough because that Georgia Tech job may not be open because Brent Key has done an amazing job of getting that team back to the basics and playing football. And I think that's not only is that a good job by Brent Key, but it's also an indictment on Jeff Collins because, I mean, nothing changed except for they eliminated that man and now they're winning. Now, we've seen this before in the past where a team rallies behind a interim coach and they do a good job. And then we've also seen where hiring that interim guy doesn't actually end up being a great idea. But, I mean, I don't know. But so anyway, the Georgia Tech job would have to be appealing because of the talent that surrounds that university or institute, however you want to phrase it. And the Auburn one obviously is enticing because it's in the SEC. And I think Auburn, it's not a stretch to say that Auburn is a top 15, 20 job in the country. If you look at it, the resources they have, where they play, the facilities that they have, the ability to get talent, it's not a stretch to say that's not like a top 15 job. It's not a stretch. Now, Arizona State is a job that's very intriguing to me because it's out in Arizona. You got the sunshine, you've got good facilities. And yeah, I thought Herman Edwards had a chance to be a really special coach out there. Kind of shocked it didn't work out. But out of the jobs that are open right now, Nebraska would be at the bottom of my list. I don't want that job. I think it's going to be hard to recruit there. I think it's going to be hard to win consistently there. And where I thought that Georgia Tech job was just a laughable job, I think Brent Key's showing you right now that it is possible to win there. Just Jeff Collins wasn't the guy for the job. And it all depends on who these people are going to go out and get. But this is tough for me, Harrison, for just the college part of it. That Georgia Tech job might be a job that you'd want to take over the Auburn job. Am I crazy?
I don't think you are. I think they definitely. I think
I
they
got a
definitely
meeting.
have.
Busted.
Sorry, I have not ate dinner, but Georgia Tech job's interesting because you're in Atlanta, and there's a talent base there. Obviously, in the state of Georgia, we talk about it all the time, but give me the resources similar to Auburn at Tech. I think you can definitely do some damage. It's all going to come down to whether or not they can get their admission staff to kind of relent some of the pressure and some of those high academic standards, bring those things down just a little bit.
Well, the other thing that they're going to have to do is they're going to have to add majors. I think Georgia Tech only has 13 majors, and that's really tough. to get everybody to kind of fit in such a narrow road, because you have guys with a lot of different skill sets. And I think the one characteristic that's unfair is to say that it's too difficult for all of these guys to get in, because the portrayal of the dumb athlete is something that I've always had an issue with. I've always had a problem with. Athletes are not dumb. Are there some out there? Of course there are some out there, but there's some, I mean, in every walk of life, you got people who don't necessarily live up to the highest standard of whatever they're doing. So to classify all athletes as dumb is not fair. You have plenty of very talented athletes that can handle the rigors of a difficult academic standard. So I don't think that's fair. But I do think they do need to add some more majors to give more people an opportunity. But at that point, it comes down to what's more important to you, the academics or the sports. And I think Georgia Tech has made it pretty clear that sports is secondary in that regard. But I'll let you take the NFL part of it and start that conversation. And I'm interested to see what your take is on that.
All right, for the reminder, what NFL job would entice a college coach, top 5 college coach, to leave? And top 5 we have listed out are Saban, Smart, Riley, and Dabo, not in that particular order, although maybe it is. Dan put in the top 5 order. So Dan, is that in order?
You know what?
Where you believe
I didn't mean for it to be, but probably it is, because that's the way that they came to mind. So okay. I don't know. Okay. Maybe it's telling. Maybe that's a subliminal. Maybe that's my top 5. I don't
know. It's tough. What NFL job would entice a top 5 college coach? Dan, you probably put this in there thinking you were going to get me, and you probably had a thought of what team I would say. And yes, Dan, I'm going to fall for it. Fall for your little trap here. I think if the Dallas Cowboys job comes open, it could entice a top 5 college coach to take it. Maybe not a Saban. I don't think Saban comes back to the NFL ever. Saban's done. But rewind maybe 10, 15 years ago when, let's just go with 10. Maybe 10 years ago, if the Cowboys job was open and, right before Saban signed that extension with Alabama, maybe he does look at it if Jerry Jones comes calling. Another one. The Patriots, maybe. It just depends on the situation. I don't think a college coach wants to replace Belichick. You never want to replace the man. That's the mantra. It's going to be like the Alabama job. No one's going to want to replace Saban. And, I mean, those two are the ones just coming to my mind. Maybe the Packers job. I don't know. If the Packers want to go into college ranked, I think they're big enough to go get somebody. But outside of those, 49ers, Steelers, just thinking off the top of my head, some of these historic franchises, you got a lot of them. If one of those guys come open, it's going to be one of those big, all these all-time franchises. If those jobs come open and they want a college coach, I think you do have some ability to lure some people in, especially if it's a contender.
Well, Dan, I'll piggyback off of you right here and say that the Cowboys, but they did come open and they tried to make a run at Lincoln Riley, and he didn't bite. So I'm interested. So where we live, I coach a lot of guys who their kids, play for me, but they're either coaches or players, the Falcons or other places. And I was talking to a guy who was a defensive coach, coached the son. And I asked him about these college coaches at one point, and he said that you have 2 different types of guys. You got the NFL guys who just love to grind, and they know that every single game they're going to go into a game with equal talent, and I'm better than you coaching-wise, and that's why we're going to win the football game. Whereas you have a guy like Saban and Smart who they're able to win because he's like the equivalent of stacking 15 first-round draft picks every single year. Like in NFL, you can't do that. It's the talent's dispersed. But in college, it's, you're going to war with a significantly better roster than everybody. So a lot of those guys don't want to leave that comfort. But the one name that comes off that list for me is I think Ryan Day wants to go to the NFL. And I think at some point it's hard for me to say that Kirby would leave Georgia because he has everything he wants and needs at University of Georgia. So, I think he's smart enough to know that he's never going to be in trouble at Georgia. And as long as he continues to recruit the way he is, he's going to have a talent advantage every single game, every single year. So I don't know about Saban or Smart, but I think Riley or Day might take that opportunity. And here's the wild card. Like, I think the teams that you mentioned are 100%, but Andy Reid is getting up there in age, and I don't think anybody really wants to give Eric Bieniemy a job, right, wrong, or indifferent. It's just that for whatever reason, the guy can't get a job. But I think if the Chiefs' job came open, say this year, just for the sake of argument, let's just say like Andy Reid is like, I won a Super Bowl, I'm out, I'm done. If you're Ryan Day or Lincoln Riley and they give you the keys to that Ferrari, why would you not take it? And I think it would take a job like that with all the tools in the world that they have to take that job. Like, I mean, if the Falcons job came open this year, do you think anybody would take the Falcons job? I really don't think any of them would take that. The Cowboys, there was a really good point Zach made on here. It's a tough job right now because of Jerry Jones has such control over everything. And I don't think he would relinquish that control. And I mean, like the Seahawks with Pete Carroll, he's way up there in age. You think that might be coming open soon, but I don't look at that as a desirable job. But then again, it's some of these guys, they just want to be in the NFL.
Absolutely. They all talked about David Shaw for years about him wanting to be an NFL coach. Dude has yet to land an NFL job. He's been at Stanford for a long time now. That was someone I thought if he, the next college coach jump to the ranks, it's going to be him. But with that being said, we went 17 minutes on the hot topic. I think that might be a record. Dan, it's time for your rant of the week.
All right. Buckle up. So if you've paid attention to any football this past week or the last 2 weeks, you know where this rant's going. Officiating. And I try not to complain about officiating because it's such a thankless job and it's such a tough job to do. But it has gotten completely out of control, folks. It's gotten to the point where you don't know what to expect on any certain play. These defensive players are being held captive by a yellow flag, and they don't know how to play football anymore. It's gotten to be ridiculous. The play that started all this week, obviously, was the sack of Tom Brady. No way, shape, or form is that a penalty anyway. And when you didn't think it could potentially get worse, you didn't think there was any chance it could get worse. If you watched the game last night, on a strip sack fumble, they call it roughing the passer. Oh my God, what are we talking? Like, it's a strip sack. The ball is loose. Like, that one. The timing of the one in the Falcons game was more egregious because it didn't allow the Falcons to recover from the bad call. At least in this particular game, it happened early enough where the Chiefs are able to recover and go on to win the football game, albeit extremely tight, where maybe that game gets out of control a little bit earlier if that doesn't get upheld. But these officials, and you have to understand that they're being asked to execute a plan. And the plan is put together by the NFL, their leadership council. And what I know they want and what they've talked about is they want to protect the quarterback because the product suffers when you have backups and third-string quarterbacks in the game. We all know this. We all agree. And we all agree, at least in some part, that the quarterbacks need to be protected. We get it. We understand. But this is completely out of control. And when we talked about the other day, you almost have to start questioning the integrity of the league at this point because they're so bad. And right, wrong, or indifferent, and maybe it's 100% wrong, but you almost had to feel like going into that game last night, they're like, hey, listen, on a sack, just throw a flag, and we're going to call it roughing the passer so that we have two of them and they can't argue anymore. But my God, Harrison, like you've got Troy Aikman in the press box talking about they need to take off the skirts and let them play football. Now, he gets attacked because they're like, oh, you're misogynistic for saying take off the skirts. We all got what he was saying. Like, the whole cancel, Troy Aikman because he said take off the skirts. That's ridiculous. I get what he meant. You know what he meant. It's that at some point we have to stop all of this nonsense and just let these guys go back to playing football. These guys in today's game could not withstand 5 minutes of a game from 1970. Go watch the highlights of those games. You got Jack Lambert coming across the middle, throwing a freaking forearm to somebody's face and knocking them out cold. I mean, it's a completely different game. We're obviously taking health a lot more serious, but I am just over these officials and the stuff that they're calling flags. I'm lost, Harris. I'm lost.
It is really bad. I don't get either call. I get the NFL's made a big deal about not putting weight on the quarterback. You don't want to put your full weight on them when you bring him down, but neither of those were malicious, violent. I mean, especially the Chris Jones one. He rolled him over. He gator rolled him. And Grady Jarrett did a very similar move. I get it. Tom Brady hit the ground maybe a little bit harder than Derek Carr, but it's not a penalty. It's not, especially on a sack. I get it. There is a rough in the passer call if you hit him, but I believe it's below the knees. If you take him out below the knees,
but that's not what happened.
Straight up, it's not what happened. I get no, but what I was saying was I get that part of it, but it doesn't make sense, Dan. It just doesn't. I can't even explain to you. I just can't explain. I can't even make a defense as to why it is. The only reason that I think it was called is because Tom Brady. No, I'm just joking. No, Tom Brady's the referee of the NFL. He's the head ref at this point. He's like LeBron James in the NBA. When Tom Brady wants a penalty, he gets it, and it's stupid. It is very stupid. But with that being said, let's get into some Georgia talk. Bounce back. What's up?
I was just going to say that the Chiefs one was worse because Chris Jones had the ball. It was a strip sack. He had the football. You're going to call passer or roughing the passer when you have woof. Anyway, let's move on to Georgia football because it's ridiculous.
With that being said, Georgia bounced back in a big way, Dan. Big way. Me and you both, we both were skeptical. I don't think either of us wanted to take the points on this one. We didn't like the spread. I was shocked when the spread came out that Georgia was a 20-plus point favorite over Auburn after playing the way they did against Missouri. This was the type of performance that we expected after the Kansas State game. They dominated, and I get it. You didn't play well for the first half, Dan. Offensively, you did not play well at all. It was not the performance you wanted. It seemed to me coming in the first half that it was probably going to be, I don't think it was going to be Auburn's going to get this with one score, but it's going to be kind of a, how do I put this? A not so pretty 2-score, 3-score game. And that's how I thought it was going to be. But the defense held it out. The defense held them out, held them to only 10 points. Auburn really got nothing going in the first half. A lot of punts, even had a fumble. And that's credit to Georgia's defense, Dan. But the big conversation around this, whether it's rightfully or wrongfully, is the performance of Stetson Bennett. And you look at his final stat line, 22 of 32, 208 yards. You think, okay, that's not bad at all. I know. It's another game where he doesn't have a passing touchdown, but he also does have an interception. But the big talk is his first half. Because the first half, Georgia scored what? I believe they scored 14 points in the first half. You're up 14-0 in the first half, if I remember correctly. Yep, 14-0 at the first half. Stetson Bennett was 7 of 30 for just 25 yards passing, and had everyone on social media up in arms. And Dan, I want your thoughts.
I think the biggest issue with Stetson in the first half is that he was missing so many open guys, and that was getting people all hot and bothered. And he just didn't look like he was in control. And now, in a vacuum, that can happen, right? But I think when you extrapolate it out to where he didn't play good against Kent State, didn't play good against Missouri, and then he has a bad first half against Auburn. Listen, it's a divided fan base anyway. Even after the national title, there's still a lot of people in this Georgia fan base who don't like Stetson Bennett. They're never going to like Stetson Bennett. After the first two games, the Heisman Trophy front runner, And now he's kind of come back down to earth, and everybody's like, I told you he was terrible. Well, listen, the truth is in the middle. He's not terrible. He's a good quarterback, and he does some good things. And, you and I talked in the preseason where Stetson is your unquestioned starter, right? Until he gets hurt, until Carson Beck has to come in, and based on what happens at that point, I think Georgia's coaching staff's worst nightmare is that Stetson has to come out of the game. Carson Beck goes in and lights the world on fire. Now, of course, you want that because you want to win the game and all that stuff, but they don't want to bench Stetson. They don't want to. They never have. They never will want to bench Stetson. But he keeps putting himself in these positions where he makes it questionable. And what I was really hoping for this year was that Stetson would just go out there, dominate, play the best ball that he can possibly play, and then we didn't have to talk about this anymore because it's so aggravating talking about it because you're talking about what you know and what you don't know. They always say the devil that you know is better than the devil that you don't, right? So, and the other aspect of that is the most popular quarterback on every single team is the second string quarterback, right? Until he has to play. We don't know what Carson Beck would do in the game. You would like to think he would have a lot of success, but if you got a 25-year-old kid playing quarterback that can't figure it out, then what makes you believe a 18, 19-year-old is going to figure it out? I think Stetson gets way too much of the blame all the time and, probably too much of credit when he doesn't necessarily deserve it. But as soon as that first half happened, I knew this conversation was going to come up, and I'm so tired of it. There's plenty more to talk about, and I'll let you say something else, but then I want to talk about this running game.
Absolutely. I'm with Dan on this one. I think Stetson gets too much of the blame. I don't necessarily agree on he may get too much of the credit when things go right because honestly, not much credit's given to him even when things go right. Now maybe that's just me. Maybe I don't see it. I don't know. I'm in some Facebook groups on Facebook and it's not pretty. Definitely not pretty. And I don't want to name names, but shoot. Whew. Guys are just some haters and it's sad. It is really, really, really sad. Call them, but we just had our cameras go out. I don't know what's going on. People in the chat, do you still see us?
I'm fine.
You're fine? Okay. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, not your best first half, and it's yet another slow start for Georgia's offense and Stetson Bennett in particular. You got to get that going, but I'm not to the point where it's we need to bench him. No, and like Zach said, ain't no debate. Stetson's QB1, and I mean you can't prove me wrong. He's not losing you football games. That's what needs to happen, guys. If you want to bench your starting quarterback, he needs to either get hurt or he needs to start losing your football games. He's not losing you football games. Now, I don't know. Kirby Smart said that he was dinged up. That's what he said in the presser. That's what it made it sound like. He was hurt after Missouri. Maybe he was playing hurt. Use that how you wish. But if he's playing through injury, it's not a way to kind of get out of criticism. You can't use it as a defense mechanism, saying he's uncriticized. You can't criticize him because he's hurt. That's not it. Okay, but Georgia's not at full strength right now, and I'm not going to get into the whole injuries as an excuse thing because I'm tired of talking about injuries and using it as excuses. Dan, tired of it. We've heard it for a whole offseason.
I think Georgia did a little bit of a market correction on this team. I think they came out this year wanting to throw the ball because a lot of these receivers, the narrative around these high school receivers is that Georgia doesn't throw the ball enough. They can't develop wide receivers. I know 2 high school wide receivers who are being heavily recruited right now that I have a relationship with, and they said they would not play at Georgia because they can't develop wide receivers. I think that's overblown, and I don't think that's fair because I think Georgia has the ability to do it. I think that they came out this year wanting to prove everybody wrong that they could throw the football all the time. And I think they kind of got away from themselves and what makes them a very talented football team. And, our favorite thing here to say on this show, and I know Rudes and everybody else loves it when we talk about the Dejan Death March, right? But Georgia, how did they take control of this game back? They're like, we're going to put the ball in the hands of this entire stable of running backs that we have because they're all damn good. And we're going to give them the ball, and we're going to run it down your throat. and we are going to just suffocate you with massive humanity at the line of scrimmage. And we're going to pound it, pound it, pound it. So Georgia does this, and they get 292 yards rushing in the football game. They only throw it for 208. But, I mean, we still threw the ball 32 times. But you had a number earlier in the season, Harrison, where you said you liked it much better when the Dogs throw it about 25 times. And that's what gets Georgia in trouble with all these young recruits, is that we don't throw the ball enough. But at the end of the day, Georgia showed you when it comes push comes to shove, they still know how to get it done. They still know what their bread and butter is. And they have a stable of running backs that can punish you. And whether it be Kenny McIntosh, Dejon Edwards, Bronson Robinson, and I mean Kendall Milton obviously been dinged up, hasn't really got it going. That's kind of just been the narrative around his entire career at Georgia. It's just that every time he has an opportunity to grab that bull by the horns, he gets dinged up, and I hate that for him because I think he's extremely talented. But Dejon Edwards don't have feelings like that, buddy. You give him the football, he's going to run it, and he's not going to worry about what you're doing. He's going to run the football. And Branson Robinson's like, hey, I'm a big boy. I can run the football too. Give me the ball. I am not scared to run it. Give it. And Bronson Robinson to me looks like the type of dude who wants to carry it 35 times a football game. So I think Georgia, at the end of the day, realized that the running game is still the biggest part of this team, and they know that they have it now. And I think at least I was a little bit concerned that maybe we lost that swagger. We lost that meanness, that ferociousness, that we could just punch you in the mouth. And I was so happy to see, and I understand it happened because Stetson wasn't playing well, and I don't enjoy that part of it. But I do enjoy the part where Georgia was like, I'm tired of this nonsense. We're a better football team than you. We're more physical than you. We're going to pound it down your throat, and there's not a thing you can do to stop it. And I love that about. And I said in our group chat, I was like, something that Dan never thought he would say is, I miss smash mouth football, because I wanted to throw the ball, but in that Auburn game, I was just so happy to see them just pounding it down their throat.
Yeah, trying to get back to what your team is good at. You've struggled, even with Stetson's, and what made Georgia's offense really good to start the year was those explosive plays, especially when you're throwing it behind the line of scrimmage. The short to intermediate plays that just went for big yardage. You're not connecting on those anymore for whatever reason, whether it's the blocking out wide, whether it's people getting dinged up, whether it's just lack of execution, missing throws, dropping balls, all this and that. You aren't hitting on them. So what's next? You got to start trying to find it in the run game. You got to get confidence back in the offense. And people had a lot of criticism for Tom Monken after their performance last week. A lot of people were criticizing why he didn't try and get Brock involved more in the game. And it is what it is. We're not in that coach's meeting room. We don't see the game plan every week. But what we can say is when you look at the stats, go back and watch the game, Branson Robinson, Dejon Edwards, just two beasts. They made plays. They stepped up. Kenny McIntosh probably isn't 100%. I don't know. I don't know that for sure. I'm not an insider, but he's probably not 100% yet. He's still, trying to get back from what it seems like from that thigh or from that, leg injury he suffered earlier in the year. Kendall Milton went down in this game. We've yet to hear what the status is on him heading in, into Vandy. But the bye week is coming at the right time, Dan. But you still got to take care of business against Vanderbilt. And this Vanderbilt team is not a Vandy team that we're all used to. Yes, if you go look at their record, you may say, what are you talking about? They just got beat by Mississippi 52-28. Well, score scouters, go turn on the TV. Go watch the game. Vanderbilt challenged Ole Miss. They challenged Ole Miss for about a half, and it was pretty impressive. They've been a pretty impressive team, damn. I know. You lost to Alabama 55-3. Okay. You lost to Wake Forest 45-25. Okay, that's a ranked team. But it hasn't been all bad. And I think that's the one big thing about Vanderbilt. They are competitive this year. They will compete. I don't foresee a 62-0 splatter this year. I don't see it. Maybe Georgia gets back in that mold of we're just going to go out here and kick your butt for 4 quarters and you're not going to do anything about it. Maybe that's what they get back to. Maybe it's a very similar performance to what they had against Oregon. But They blew out, Vanderbilt blew out Hawaii, a not good Hawaii team, but they blew them out, which is awesome. Beat Elon. You lost to Wake Forest. You respond, beat Northern Illinois. I didn't expect Vandy to be where they are. I didn't think they were going to be this good. Kirby Smart, the most improved teams, if not the most improved team in the conference, which I agree with them because Vanderbilt's always been kind of a dead-end job unless you're Derek Mason.
Yeah, and Vanderbilt has a lot of difficult circumstances around their football team also. If we talk about a team like Duke or we talk about a team like Georgia Tech or Stanford even, where they have these very high academic standards. And it's not that these top-tier athletes can't get in. It's just that as much time and effort that is required to be an elite football player, it's very difficult to give that same amount of time and effort to academics that it would require. Because if you're at a school like Vanderbilt or Duke or stuff like that, you have to take all those extremely high level classes. And again, this is not the dumb athlete comment. That's not where I'm going with any of this. Is because I think these athletes are extremely bright, intelligent, and they can do the work. But if you are talking about trying to compete at the level of Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, you don't have the time to dedicate to academics that you would have if you were just purely a student. So I think that's why a lot of your elite athletes shy away, and then also facilities, prestige, all that other stuff. But Vanderbilt has always done, well, I shouldn't say always, it's not fair, but Vanderbilt, when they have the right person, they have the ability to really coach up what they have and compete. And this Vanderbilt team has shown the ability to compete. Now, if you take the Alabama game, losing 55-3, that's more in line with Georgia should be able to do this football team. They lean on the pass, on the run. They're rushing for 167 yards a game. I would be very shocked if they hit the 100-yard mark against Georgia. I don't see that happening. Their leading running back is Davis, 108 carries, 507 yards, 4 touchdowns, which far surpasses Georgia's leading rusher, which is Dejon, with 284 yards. Still has the 4 touchdowns, but, basically 200 less yards. But, literally less than half the carries. I mean, 108 carries to 49 carries. I think Georgia is going to be able to run it when they want to run it. Brooks has mentioned a couple times now this season, whether it be on the radio or in his articles, that so this isn't out of school or whatever. You can find this. I mean, he said it on 680 The Fan. Georgia doesn't have an X, and until A.D. Mitchell comes back, that's going to be a really big deal. And they're having to scheme guys open. You don't have that true X who you can isolate on one side of the field and just have confidence that he's going to win every single time. They've put some guys out there. Ladd McConkey, that's not his jam, guys. He's not an X. So I think there are some difficulties around this passing game for Georgia. I would not be shocked to see Georgia come out with heavy run in this football game, establish their dominance early, and maybe get up a quick couple scores on Vanderbilt to where they have to put the ball in the air, and then let that extremely talented secondary just go hunting and see if we can't get some of those balls in the air. I think this is a game where Georgia can come out, really establish themselves early, and then maybe get an opportunity for some of these young guys to play, which we have not seen like we were supposed to be able to see all year long against, Kent State and Missouri, and we should have got some guys into those football games and just were not able to do that. So maybe this is the game where Georgia comes out, gets that big lead, and we finally get to see some of this youth play.
Yeah, I'm looking at the betting lines now. 38.5 point favorite. That's according to SI Sportsbook. That's what Georgia is. They have a 98.6% chance to win. It's tough. Coming into the season after the Oregon game, after the South Carolina game, you're like, shoot, I'm betting on Georgia to cover every game now, for the regular season. Maybe not the Tennessee game, depending on what that line is, but I'm betting on Georgia to cover. Now it's a lot tougher. You've had a few games where you have not covered and have not come close. So, it's always tough when you talk about betting line this year because this Georgia team's talented by all means, but it's not the Georgia team that they had last year. Whether or not it's as good, or if better than some of the past teams that haven't won the national championship under Kirby Smart, you have to be determined. We'll see. I don't know where the tier system is. Maybe that's a episode idea, Dan, for next week is trying to rank all the Georgia teams under Kirby Smart through a tier system. Maybe that's something we do next week. Let us know in the comments in the live chat if you would like to sit here with us and have Dan and I kind of tier all these different teams, according to success and talent. But anyways, it's hard to say where this Georgia team ranks compared to past teams. I don't think this is as good as the national championship team last year. I think that goes without saying. But, can they still win a championship without being that talented? Yet to be seen. Yet to be seen. Dan and I talked about it over the phone today, and we're going to bring it up right now. I agree. He said it best. Dan said there isn't a number one team in college football right now. There is not a team that has stood out consecutively, consistently. Yes, everyone's going to sit here and say maybe Ohio State's it. I may agree with you. After the Notre Dame game, they've kind of stood out. But as some people like to mention, they haven't played really anyone good. But to play devil's advocate here, outside of Oregon, who has Georgia played that we say, okay, they're better than what Ohio State's playing? Maybe Auburn? So, Dan, let's get your take.
So, where I would start this conversation is with Georgia at 6-0. At this point of the season, you would think that you have more answers than questions. And if we're being honest and truthful, I still think we have a lot of questions to answer about this Georgia football team. Are they talented? Yes. Do they have the ability to win? I think they do. But there's still a lot of questions. And, we circled the Tennessee game and the Kentucky game. I think Florida game is going to be tougher than you think. And I think the Tennessee game is really scary at this point. Maybe this week Alabama plays Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken. It's this week, right? And maybe Alabama exposes them and just absolutely blasts them out of the water. And maybe we see that they're not as good as we actually thought they were. But I still think that's going to be a tough game. And to your point, I have a lot of questions about Alabama. I don't think Alabama's as dominant as they've been in the past. And we were told coming into the season, this is going to be the best Bama team ever. Well, they don't look like it. Georgia had a ton of talent to replace. They come out the first two games, look like world beaters, and now they look really average, above average. And I have a lot of questions. And this Tennessee team comes out, and they're lighting the world on fire, and they're scoring points, which you and everybody else, Harrison, said this Tennessee team will score a ton of points, and they are. Kentucky does not look like that team. They are not him. I think we got our hopes up for that Kentucky game. Mississippi State is another team that's left on the schedule where I think they're a good football team. Ohio State, would I have them number one? I guess. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, the only reason I wouldn't want Ohio State number one is because if they lose, they could still potentially stay in. And I don't think a one-loss Ohio State team should go in. USC has been good, but there's a lot of questions surrounding USC. I guess if we're being honest about all of it, just every one of these teams, Harrison, has questions. There's not a single team where I watch them and I'm like, oh, yeah, like check, 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 check. I mean, every single team has got one or two questions, like glaring questions that need to be answered. Michigan is ranked ahead, is ranked right behind Ohio State. I think they're 4 or 5, right? 4 maybe. Michigan.
They're 5, and we're gonna figure out Michigan this week, Dan. They play Penn State. Penn State. I think Michigan. We will know who's with Ohio State at the end of the Saturday.
Yeah, I think that's not going to be a problem for Michigan. I'm just being honest. But this is interesting. Zach brings this up right here. If Bryce Young doesn't play this week against Tennessee, Tennessee wins. I can't argue.
I can see it.
I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
And then now, I mean, I don't want this scenario to play out because I don't want to hear all the Alabama fans and all their bull crap excuses. Alabama's the only team in the country allowed to have excuses. They're the only team that can have a struggle win, and it's a good win. But if Georgia has a struggle win, it's a bad win. But yet somehow Alabama's in our heads living rent free. Like, I hate Alabama fans. I am making a strong conviction to not interact with Alabama fans on Twitter because they're idiots. Like at least all the ones that are on Twitter are. I mean, I'm sure there are plenty rational, smart Alabama fans in the world. That whole thing doesn't really go together, but there has to be one or two. But the ones that are on social media are a bunch of idiots.
Absolutely. Well, there's some. That was the bad response. There's some. Majority of I see are not very fun to interact with. Dan was in the firing hole a few weeks back, and sadly, nobody came to his defense. Dan just sat there and just kind of took it on the chin. But guys, that's gonna wrap it up for episode 61 of the Top Dog Talk podcast. That's Dan Kiley. I'm Harrison Moreno. I do want to address it because I forgot to address it at the beginning of the show. Yes, I am dealing with a head cold. That is why if my voice sounds just a little bit different, that's why I told Dan, you're gonna have to kind of run point a little bit. We're gonna play some we're gonna. It's a flu game, but you're gonna be the Michael Jordan of this show. I'm gonna be the Scottie Pippen. Just let you ISO. So guys, that's gonna wrap it up for today.
Oh wait,
Dan. Real quick.
We got to do our score predictions for Vanderbilt. What do you got?
It's about to hit that. I don't think Georgia covers. 38.5 is kind of big for me, especially coming off of a huge win over Auburn, in which they covered. I don't know. I think Georgia eclipses the 40-point mark, but I don't know if Georgia covers.
Oh, I have been off the bullish Georgia bandwagon where I've been saying I didn't think they would cover, didn't think they would cover. I'm back on. I think Georgia found themselves running the football game. I'm going to go 49-7. That's it.
Hey, it was
49-7.
Something we didn't bring up. It was a good sign. Georgia ran the ball really effectively and still covered. Still put up 42 points running the football. That's pretty impressive. So with that being said, guys, make sure to subscribe to the podcast. Make sure to like the video. Make sure to find us wherever you get your podcasts. We will see you back next week for episode number 62. It's going to be a bye week next week. So enjoy this Vandy win. Enjoy your Saturday because next week you're going to be sitting on your couch having to watch all these other teams college football. We'll see you back next week.